just thinking about a song that I'm writing now, if you start with an imagination of a sound or of an atmosphere or something, and then gradually that kind of trickles down onto a physical level. This is the first song in Dichterliebe, in Wunderschönen Monat Mai. What's great about it is the way he doesn't fulfill the expectations that we'd have of what the musical text would do. And the ways that he breaks away from what our kind of standard expectations would be are really interesting and kind of musically exciting. So the first one, or the first time he does this, is really just at the end of the first two bars. We've had a kind of an approach chord, quite a dissonant chord, and then a cadential chord. But instead of resolving it like you might expect into the tonic chord, he simply repeats those first two bars. So really maintaining the tension that he set up. So really lengthening, in a way, what you'd expect, really lengthening it and creating that wonderful atmosphere. Then the voice comes in, and again, what we might expect is that cadence into the home tonic. But instead of doing that, which of course goes with the words "in the wonderful month of May," and suddenly the music opens up. It's that beautiful, sunny A major moment. You have to be in quite a still place to start with in order to listen. So there can't be a lot of thoughts or a lot of kind of physical agitation. Otherwise, your judgments are kind of clouded, I suppose. You have to be able to enter quite a calm, quite a lucid state, and also quite an open state, in order to then be able to judge what you're making. I guess it's just part of my personality that I like to create things. So there's a desire to kind of to be making stuff. Beyond that, I suppose it's about where you find your inspiration. Be it poetry or nature or the city or whatever. The initial idea might come with a lot of energy and a lot of agitation, as it were, and in fact you might need that energy in order to get anywhere, to get any notes. You need that force, if you like. You need to sort of ride it like a wave and sort of go with it. Then at a later stage there has to be some more objective look. stayed with this composer in Sweden for 6 weeks, and we spent a lot of the time in the basement fixing the boiler. And he talked a lot about how, you know, that was an integral part of composition, just as, you know, the what we normally think of as being composing was. You know, fixing the boiler is necessary for, you know, writing music. Music can be seen as something which is kind of spiritual and otherworldly. At the same time, for me, it's very important that it does come out of your visceral lived experience. And in fact, you know, the things that you find annoying and agitating, actually, they do give you quite a lot of energy, which can be kind of channeled into a creative act. Being in that slightly uncomfortable situation gives you the energy that you need when you then go back to the desk. It gives you a kind of urgency, in a sense, which if you've just been sitting at the desk all day, or if you've only been doing nice things, you don't necessarily have that energy, that kind of urgency, that kind of vitality, I suppose. You're just creating some actually quite base energy when you're doing that kind of activity, and then if somehow you manage to, in some kind of, or sometimes in a kind of alchemical process, you manage to sort of transmute that into something which is quite fine and which can then be, you know, used in a creative way. And I mean, that's a very difficult transmutation of energy to achieve. Certain situations allow you to access a kind of energy which you're not always able to contact otherwise. It's in those moments craft is more conscious, really, and because you're kind of you're creating, as it were, raw material. So craft is there because, you know, you've got an innate sense of craft through your education, through your likes and dislikes, you know, through all of that. But then the way I see it, I suppose, is that then craft comes to the fore later when you're working the pieces together, or when you're revising, when you're, you know, stretching or cutting or splicing, or, you know, whatever process you're involved in. A lot of the time, the process of composition is, you know, is impossible. It's really difficult. Everything that you're writing is kind of contingent on things that you have written, but it's also contingent on things that you haven't yet written. You know, and you can't write those things yet because you've not written what you've written, but you need to know what those things are in order to write what you're trying to write at the moment. So a lot of the time it's you know, difficult or even impossible. But then sometimes, you know, when you're really in touch with the language of the piece that you're writing, then the kind of the gates are open somehow, and you can kind of flow along in a zone where the creative energy is balanced by craft, or craft manages to keep up with it. That might be another way of putting it. Just a very short passage from a piece that I wrote last year, which always started like this. That kind of descending scale. Then the oboe would come in. And then I've written some chords straight after that. I can't read this chord now. Oh! So I kind of had a number of different options, if you like, as to where the music could go from there. The oboe line could be continued, or the chords could come in and that could kind of take us somewhere else, completely different. So I've got a kind of a number of options, and it's really trying to discern which of those is the best option for this place in the piece. And I decided that I didn't want to have the chords yet. I was going to save them for a bit later. So that was the first decision. Then I must have decided that I didn't want the oboe to come in straight away, because that was kind of too soon, a bit of a shock perhaps. So I wrote another little passage which kind of prepares a little bit more, gives us a little bit more time to prepare for the oboe to come in, by repeating this last chord. And then the oboe came in. And actually that second draft was reasonably close to what I ended up with. Just an interesting thing that happened on the way. Above that draft, I, at a later stage, wrote extend, because I obviously felt that bit kind of wasn't quite right, and it needed to be longer. Comparing that, however, with the final score, actually, it isn't any longer. So, but what's happened is that the components have been shifted round. They're not in the same order, and so that changing of order kind of has done the same thing as what the extension would have done, but without making it any longer. Because I think I quite liked the fact that it came in slightly before you expected it.